I had to put some notes together. But I'm usually pretty nervous before I give speeches, and tonight I'm not. I feel like, I'm part of a family, I'm part of a community that, no matter what I say up here, everybody's gonna be all right. But thank you for being here. I wanted to say that right away. I'll get to more of that in a little bit. But one of the reasons Travis wanted me to speak tonight is just to give kind of a perspective of, what,
I took your
what we're
seat.
here
I'm
for,
sorry.
what everything we're doing is for, why we're going to paddle 82 miles across Florida. The main thing is, I should not be alive right now to speak to you.
Oh, wow.
20 years ago, I should have passed away in a hospital bed in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. I was born in 1972. You can do the math later. And it was a snowy March morning in Cleveland, Ohio, of all places. And I was a healthy weight, healthy baby. My family took me home, and two and a half months later, I was back in the hospital with severe pneumonia and failure to thrive, which means I couldn't gain weight. So they did some tests, and I was diagnosed with a disease that my parents had never heard of before, called cystic fibrosis. And at that time, the average age of somebody with CF living was 3 years old. So, my parents were shell-shocked. They found out that their child has a terminal disease that they can hardly pronounce. And the doctors told them, they said, take him home, love him, he's not going to be around for very long. So that was the start of my life. So thankfully, pharmaceutical and medical advancements, kept up with me. And, I had a fairly normal childhood. I was always the real skinny kid that coughed a lot. And it sounded like I smoked a pack a day every day. And it was a challenging childhood. And I know that there's, kids here with CF and adults that they can probably relate to this, You so want to fit in, especially like in junior high school. Sometimes you're carrying an oxygen tank. There's no way that you can even be cool or get girls' phone numbers when you're pulling an oxygen tank. Trust me. But I had, back then, there wasn't a lot known about cystic fibrosis, so there was some discrimination growing up. Parents didn't want their kids playing with me because they didn't want to catch their kids catching what I had. My mom, God bless her, tried to educate them and everything, but it's still, it was the way it was at that time. And, I had a really hard childhood, but, I wouldn't change it for anything. It taught me a lot of life lessons that I still carry to this day. And, it really taught me who my friends were. I'm still best friends with the guy who pushed me in the ditch in preschool when we were 4 years old. He lives 20 miles from me to go surfing occasionally. So he's got kids and he's got his own thing going. It really, it was a hard childhood, but I wouldn't change it for anything. So, fast forward, big leap here. So I was 29 years of age. I had gone to college. I had done everything. I had started surfing when I was 13 years of age, which was not what my mom wanted me to do with my life, to say the least. Because back then, she's like, oh, it's a bunch of druggies and dropouts and those people. So, but I still got into it, and I was at the beach almost every day. It was 13 when I started, because I remember because my best friend's brother got his driver's license, and that opened up the whole world to us. So, a few years, probably 5 or 6 years after that, was when they came out with the study in Australia about the Australian surfers with cystic fibrosis, where being in a hyper-saline environment such as the ocean was actually really good for kids with CF. And that's where they started the whole hypertonic saline solution for kids with CF that came from a study of surfers in Australia. So my mom read this in the newspaper and showed it to me, and she said, you can go ahead and say I told you so. No. But anyway, so fast forward, I'm 29, I'm walking around just wasn't feeling good. And, you know, I'd been in and out of the hospital a little bit throughout my life, but nothing really major. My parents, the doctors, you know, they never sugarcoated anything. They were just like, I knew I was different. I knew I probably had an expiration date, and I was not going to live a long life. So at that time, I decided I'm going to have as much fun as I can. You know, never in trouble with the cops, but pretty close. So, 29 was the year everything went downhill very quickly. I couldn't walk 10 feet without stopping and coughing and keep going, stop and cough, keep going. And we found out that I had bacterial pneumonia that had gone undiagnosed for a while, and it basically shredded my lungs. So I went on full-time oxygen at that point, and then 4th of July weekend that year, I went into the hospital because I was on so much oxygen that they couldn't support it anymore. And I was told by my doctor, he said, so the 2 ways you're going out of here. He said, you're either going out with a lung transplant, double lung transplant, or you're going to pass away, and that's how you're going to do it. That's a pretty big pill to swallow when you're 29. You know, growing up with a terminal disease, you're always faced with mortality. You always know it's not going to be very long. You know? And that was one of the reasons why I lived my life how I wanted to live. In my generation, you know, now it's different. You know, people with CF are living in their 40s, 50s, 60s. You know, it's a lot different. You know, I didn't know what to expect growing up. But anyways, so I ended up getting put in the hospital, and things went down very quickly. I had a couple of false falls, which meant that lungs became available, but for one reason or another, they denied it. I was going in and out of CO2 comas. Lungs became available for me on September 11th in 2001, but because of what happened in New York and the nationwide flying ban, the doctors weren't allowed to fly out to my lungs. So at that point, the doctors were like, he's done. That's it, he's done. Luckily, I survived 4 more days, September 15th, and I got my new set of lungs. This year will be my 20th lung anniversary, as we call it. So, during that time in the hospital, you know, I went through some pretty dark evenings, dark times. You know, when you're in the hospital, 100%, you know, you have people come to visit you. You kind of become the king of being the happy, sad clown. Because people come to see you, and they're like, oh, hey, you know, they want to cheer you up and everything. So you had to be smiling all the time, just no matter how you felt on the inside. But yeah, I went through some pretty dark times. One night, I was having a difficult night, and I just put a pen to paper and made a list. And I said, it was everything that I wanted to do, but had either physically couldn't do because of CF, or I just run out of time. And a lot of it was surfing different places, climbing mountains. It was all physical stuff. And then, for some reason, I put do a triathlon on there. I don't know where it came from, but I was like, hey, that's crazy. Let's put that on the list. So I made a vow to myself. I said, if I get through this, I'm going to start checking these things off the list. So a little over, well, during the time in the hospital, the last 2 months I was there, I was completely bedridden. So I couldn't get up, couldn't do anything. So after I got my transplant, I had to relearn how to walk because my leg muscles were completely atrophied. Looked like I was walking on spaghetti noodles. So to give you an idea how bad it was, when they finally let me out of the hospital, I had to go to CVS to get a prescription filled, and I didn't have the leg strength to step up on the curb. I had to walk up the handicap ramp to go into the store. But luckily, I had a physical therapist that was just as crazy as I was. And one day he was like, "Why are you pushing yourself so hard?" He said, "You know, most people, you know, get a lung transplant, they're like, whew, I'm done. You know, I'm just gonna chill out and do nothing." And I was like, you know, if you were in a wheelchair, all of you, by some miracle you could walk again, wouldn't you want to run a marathon? Maybe I'm just crazy, I don't know. But I told him, I said, my goal is to do a triathlon. And he kind of paused. I mean, this is a bold statement coming from somebody who can't walk 25 feet. And he looked me in the eye and he said, well, let's get you started. So that was the beginning of journey number one after my transplant. So, I went through and did, I don't know how many short course triathlons. I ended up being the first double lung transplant to finish a half Ironman. And then in 2006, I became the first double lung transplant to finish a full Ironman. I've got a long pedigree. So I ended up doing 7 Ironmans. During this time, I met my beautiful wife, Leanne, over there. She got into triathlons, now she does endurance racing. She's known as the Canadian Crusher. In case you see her out and about. So, but during this time, it was brought to my attention that people were paying attention to it in the CF movement. Up until I did Ironman New Zealand, that was my first Ironman. And up to that point, everything, to be kind of selfish, was about me. It was like, I am doing this because I want to do it, and I couldn't do it before. I don't care what anybody thinks. I'm doing this. And so, I got invited to Ironman New Zealand by a mother who had 2 children with cystic fibrosis. And my main fundraiser for that year was cystic fibrosis. And when I got there was a young girl named Amber. She was 7 years old, had cystic fibrosis. She attached herself to my hip the whole time I was there. And I was getting ready to go for a swim one morning, and she was there, of course, my shadow. And I could tell she had something she wanted to say to me, and didn't know how to say it or was embarrassed to say it. But I kind of brought it out of her. I said, hey, man, you look like you got something to say. What are you thinking about? She looked at me, looked out of the water, she looked back at me. And she said, Mr. Scott, I don't think Lance Armstrong's my hero anymore. I think you are. And I was thinking, my first thought was, she's never seen me drunk on a Saturday night. But then, the logical brain kicked in. And, that's when I finally realized that, hey, this is getting bigger than me. This is a lot bigger than me. So, doing the racing and Ironman and everything was really great. And I met a lot of people and raised a lot of money for CF during that process. But you can only race those races. I ended up doing 7 in 5 years, which I do not recommend to anybody because it's way too long. And then my wife and I bought paddleboards from Costco, got the foam top paddleboard, and went paddling and met up with the Wednesday night group where another friend of mine, Scott Gurley, who's on the team sitting over there, he and I used to surf back in the day together and then lost touch over about 10 years, and then when he brought us back together. And just like Ironman, I didn't realize how addictive paddleboarding was. So it's like, okay, we got the foam tops, let's go explore. And then we show up to a paddle group, and I'm like, hey, those are nice boards. How much are those? I like that, the color on that one. I like that one. So, very quickly, the cheap foam top turned into race boards, and we did some races. We ended up doing Chattajack in Tennessee one time. And I don't say never often, but I would never do that race again. So, fast forward a couple of years. 2019, I believe it was, we were at the Carolina Cup with some friends of ours were racing it. And there was a tent in the expo area across the First here. And I had read about that in a magazine. I kind of remember what it was about, but my wife had gone over there and talked to Travis. And she came back up to me and she said, look, you have to go over there and talk to these people. And she's like, don't get any crazy ideas about actually doing this thing. Go over there and tell them your story. And so I walked over there, met Travis when he had long hair. Remember the old Travis with long hair? That's who I met. And, there are certain times in your life when you meet somebody that you realize that you're going to be friends for the rest of your life. And that was what I felt. And I hope that he felt when we first met. Maybe he thinks I'm annoying, I don't know. But so this was, I think, March or April of 2019. And, you know, I'm telling my story and he's tearing up. And, you know, I didn't know about Piper. I didn't know about all this. I'm just telling somebody my story that I thought could use it. You know, hey, do this, do that. And I think I ended it by saying, anything you need, man, just give me a call. Let me know. And his retort to that was, I know it's only like March or April, the race is in June, but you should come do it. And I'm like, no, I'm not doing that. Because I've got a month and a half to train, I'm not doing that. So, but, you know, Travis, like a lot of things, puts that bug in your ear and it just starts eating away and eating away. And finally, you know, I gave in. I was like, all right. So we were supposed to do it last year. And, you know, because of COVID and everything else, we weren't allowed to. But, you know, I talked to him about it late last year, early this year, and I said, planets are aligning. You know, doing it. It's the 20-year anniversary of my lung transplant. I was like, I've got it. You know, I have to. So, you know, I really appreciate what Travis has done. I've been part of a lot of communities over the years. And what he has done for Piper's Angels and meeting Piper and everybody here, you know, it's truly amazing. You know, everybody that I've talked to has just been unbelievable. Everybody is very, give you the shirt off their back, and I've never seen that with anything that I've done in the past. So, thank you again for being here. I read a quote the other day. Actually, I think it was on a t-shirt that I thought was appropriate here. So, you know, one thing that, you know, if you've never done something like this before, be ready for an emotional roller coaster. You're going to have highs, and you're going to have very lows. And you just got to keep in mind that, you know, pain is temporary. You're going to be back up high just a little bit, and you push through this. And, you know, when you get down to it, you are going to suffer for a very small part of your life to achieve something that you're going to remember for the rest of your life. And I like to think, with the things that I've done and the people here, we're going to have the best stories in the assisted living facility. Sitting at the table going, all right, I got one more for you. So, but during the paddle, you know, it's going to hurt, it's going to suck at some points, but just realize that every standing up, sitting down, crying, you know, whatever, is one stroke closer to Florida and your goal. You know, one of the things that I try to tell everybody is you may not know it, but somebody that you've dealt with and talked to about this views you as a hero and looks up to you for doing this. You may not know who it is. It may have been somebody, honestly, that donated to you. It may be your daughter or son, a niece, nephew. Somebody looks up to you for this. So everybody here, in my eyes, you're a hero. And we couldn't do this without you. I'm living proof that raising money for cystic fibrosis goes to a good thing. And I can't thank you enough. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you for allowing me to meet my wife and come here and paddle in Florida like a crazy man. So, getting emotional, so I'm going to end it here, but thank you anyway.